knew there would be some hardcore people that would show up, so I made it a point to be on time today. But since we're just a handful here, I think we can take advantage of that, this opportunity, and just kind of open it and review any particular aspects of what has been discussed in these past 4 sessions that you would like to focus on. Or for that matter, to introduce for discussion any topic that you feel will be useful in aiding you in your quest for spiritual knowledge and self-realization. Or I can sit here and bore you for another hour. Quite capable of that as well. So whatever you like, I defer to you. Yes?
Will it just have to be on what we discussed for the last few weeks, or could it be on anything spiritual?
Yes, provided it is something that will aid you on your quest for self-realization.
I want to really talk about more about my ops.
More about my art. Is the word by its very definition implied, my art deals with a level of order. In the ancient Kemetic system, Ma'at was that deity that represented order, harmony, balance, unity throughout the cosmos, and therefore throughout the individual makeup as well. And so very often Ma'at came to represent the theme and the goal and the objective that each individual participated in that particular worldview was strive towards. The understanding that unless one is able to bring oneself in order, then it's not possible to find order around oneself. So the ancient African sages had this insight. And so therefore Ma'at became the symbol of the whole quest for the attainment of that kind of internal balance and harmony. And it's the harmony of all of the different parts of oneself, obviously. The harmonizing of all of the faculties in ourselves, etc., etc., etc. So Ma'at is a very crucial concept to comprehend for those who are in search of any kind of spiritual awareness. You can't really attain anything on the spiritual path unless you have order. Meaning, of course, that you have to begin with your outer life. That has to be brought into Ma'at. Bringing your outer life into Ma'at is achieved fundamentally through the establishing of a strong moral foundation. As Khufu, you recall in your studies of Ma'at, Ma'at centers around being capable of making the 42 negative confessions, as you well know. Whenever the soul entered into the hall of justice, where they were having their lifetime weighed to determine whether or not they would be fit to keep company with the Osiриses. They, of course, had to demonstrate that they had been able to achieve a certain degree of morality, a certain degree of mastery, that they had not slandered, they had not lied, they had not hurt, so forth and so on. So these 42 negative confessions that you find throughout ancient Egyptian spiritual literature are indications of the degree of order that those early followers of that particular system aim to achieve in their lifetime, to bring it into Ma'at, to bring it into order. The other levels, of course, that involve Ma'at is once one is finished bringing one's outer life into a state of order, is to bring one's inner life, one's thoughts, the turmoil that goes on into our mind, all of that confusion that exists inside of us, all of that has to also be brought into order. And that becomes the aim, goal, and objective of meditation, yoga, is to bring that internal world that we all live in into order. Very often, you will find that you will not ever see an outer life that is in chaos, that is not a reflection of an inner life that is in chaos. Your outer life is a reflection of your inner state of mind. So in some sense, we really can't talk about the separation between the two. There really isn't. As we start to bring our inner lives in order, our outer life automatically comes in order as well. But for purposes of discussion, we are segregating it. But I want you to understand that there is no seam or separation between the inner and the outer. They are dynamic. But in any event, when we talk about yoga and meditation, we are focusing on the understanding that we have to bring something inside of us into ma'at, into balance. Ma'at is the recognition that everything in the universe has a place, hence the term order. Everything has a time and a place for its existence. And in the ancient systems of cosmology, if you recall Khufu, that as creation involutes down toward this lowest level of physical manifestation, when it came to the point of ma'at, that is where order got established, so that you would not have chaos in the universe. So there had to be a principle that organizes everything in the universe. And that too is represented by ma'at. So ma'at is a cosmic as well as an individual phenomenon. But essentially that's a fundamental understanding of ma'at. Now of course there's a lot more to go with that, naturally. But for purposes of this discussion, I think that puts you in the right direction. So one aim for establishing ma'at. I think that while on that subject, we might as well sort of summarize, if you will, the discussions that we've had over the past 4 occasions. And from there, we can open up for any last-minute questions and things of that nature. Would that be all right with you? Since you don't have any questions left, huh? Maybe I'll generate some more questions in your mind. Basically, what we've discussed in these last 4 sessions, where we've been looking at deep wisdom and the whole process of attaining such, we've covered many things. I think what we will do today is simply focus in on some of the major aspects of spiritual development that has to be bared in mind at all times. We've talked so much about suffering, and I want to remind you that after all, it is this personal suffering and misery that we are all individually undergoing that really constitutes the whole foundation of the spiritual search. All human beings are in search of some solution to their personal misery and their suffering, their sorrow, and their confusion. Each of us have adopted our own respective strategies and approaches toward finding solutions to these very, very real problems. And when we review the infinite variety of strategies that have demonstrated themselves in the lives of people throughout the ages, we're certainly amazed to find that in spite of all of our individual efforts, no one seems to be able to really find this elusive peace of mind, this kind of permanent peace of mind that does not whack, that does not waver. And the mystics, of course, suggest to us that there is a way out of this dilemma that we all find ourselves in. And that becomes the whole motivation for the search for wisdom. After all, why else would you search for wisdom? Why else would you even pursue something spiritual if you are not fundamentally in a state of dilemma and suffering and misery? There will be no basis from which your spiritual search could emerge in the first place. So to remember that that is the essential condition that we all find ourselves in. And we have adopted all kinds of distractions to try to take our attention off of this fundamental suffering, this fundamental sorrow, this fundamental confusions that our lives are in. And this then becomes the real basis of the spiritual search. And in that search, in order to find this missing link to a permanent state of peace, joy, bliss, we've talked about several essential things. The first thing that you recall we talked about is the necessity for a guru. That is the starting point on any path. The Pahotep, the great ancient African sage and administrator, made it very clear that nobody is born wise. Therefore, the need for a teacher. that we all are born with the capacity to be wise. But without a teacher, there is no way for us to really develop that potentiality. And this is the most critical point on any serious consideration of the spiritual path, is that one has to decide in their mind whether or not they will need to take the help of the Buddha. All mystics, all saints, all sages, across all religions, across all time, culture, have emphasized the fact that without the Buddha, there is no way possible to make any kind of authentic spiritual progress. And this is something that you really have to look into. This is something you really have to really investigate. There's not going to be any way for you to, out of your own suffering, transcend it. And this is really the essence of any spiritual path. Now, I know that might sound really strange for those of us who've been orientated toward the spiritual seeking in the West here, where we've been pretty much convinced that we can do all of these things in and of our own volition. But the reality is that no one has attained any kind of real enlightenment without the aid and the guidance of the Buddha. And that becomes the foundation of all spiritual search, and that is something that you really have to look into. In the West, we have an inbuilt resistance toward these things, naturally, because in our culture, the emphasis is placed on doing your own thing, you see. And that's why it is very difficult for people in the West to make spiritual progress. That's a very interesting observation that you will notice if you look deeply into any of the various spiritual traditions. The whole Western mindset is such that it is very difficult for it to surrender its autonomy and individuality. But such surrendering has to be done in the initial stages of the path. Certainly, a time comes when there is absolutely no need for the Buddha. That's also true. Absolutely true. But in order to get to that stage, one has to go through and use a Buddha. So we talked a little bit about the Buddha and the function of the Buddha as it relates to the spiritual journey. As it relates to suffering, I'd like to discuss some of the means by which we are able to deal effectively with our suffering. How many are familiar with Buddhism? Buddhamaji, I know you're familiar with everything, so, and I suppose Brother Kenyatta, unfortunately by her association, she has affected you as well. But in any case, one of the most beautiful concepts that comes down to us through Buddhism is the concepts of the three refuges, the three jewels, as we call them. And I'd like to talk a little bit about those, if you like, this morning. Remember, this is the final and last session that we are having out of that 5 workshop sessions. So whatever you didn't get, please feel free to stop me before I go off on some tangent here. This is just an open discussion today, so I have no particular structure that I need to follow. But if you don't have anything in particular that you want to bring to the floor, then I'll continue talking about the 3 refuges that the Buddha talked about and how they relate to suffering. I want you to understand, everything is related back to your suffering. Everything is related back to your sorrow, your misery, the inevitability of your death and dying. Again, in the West, we have a lot of difficulty dealing with the inevitability of our death and dying, our own mortality. In fact, we try to repress this awareness as much as we can. And the mystics say that repress as much as you like, distract yourself as much as you like. The reality is that you're going to die. That is a fact. And you're going to die under circumstances that you're not even aware of, and at a time that you can't even predict. This is the fundamental core of the suffering, the misery. And so the mystics and saints say that is there a way out of this suffering? Is there a way out of this misery? Is there a way out of this sorrow, this confusion? And they say, yes, there is a way out of it. Instead of seeking refuge in all of the things that we run to. And remember, everything that we are running to, we're running to seeking refuge from this fundamental suffering and this fundamental sorrow. Have you ever thought about it? You run into relationships fundamentally to alleviate your suffering on a personal. unenlightened. We are seeking refuge from this very fundamental suffering in all kinds of acts and activities. And what's more important is to see on a personal level how you have been dealing with this suffering. And then you can begin to understand something of the teachings. Until you have looked closely at your own lives, examined it, and looked at your activity that you were involved in this escape from suffering, it is very hard to appreciate what these mystics are talking about. Very, very difficult to get some insight. But again, Buddha and all of the masters have said over and over again that if you are wise, meaning if you have pause for a moment, observe your life. And remember, there is no other way to attain wisdom. Now you can read all of the books that you like. You could attend all of these meetings that you like. You could go on doing this till the end of time, and you will not become wise. Wisdom is not a function of the collection of information and then the analysis of that information. That is not wisdom. That's just information. And information does not transform anybody. If we have attained wisdom, wisdom in the sense that we have looked closely at our lives, there is no other way to attain wisdom. One must look at oneself, one must look at one's life and observe very closely the activity that one has been engaged in the hopes of bringing an ending to one's sorrows. It is this kind of self-awareness, this kind of self-observation that results in wisdom. A wisdom now that is adequate in order to take advantage of the teachings of the masters. After all, this is not the first time in our long history of incarnations that we've heard teachings. Many of us was at the feet of the Bhagwan, or Kachana, or the great African mystics. We're at the feet of the Buddha, or Moses, or Muhammad, or Jesus, and so forth and so on. This is not the first time we heard teachings at all. We've heard them before without the context of wisdom. Hence, we're not enlightened in this way. See? So we're going to have to find our own wisdom, and we cannot rely on books for that. We're going to have to do the work to attain it. If one is able to attain some degree of wisdom, then one is able to appreciate these great statements by the Buddhas. And their first statement is as it relates to the ending of suffering and sorrow, as it relates to the real refuge from our own misery and pain and confusion. The Buddha says, Nama Guru Vaya. The Buddha said, I seek a refuge in the Guru. Again, as I said before, this is the first step on any authentic spiritual path. And remember, I've said that you have to be very careful in the selection of a Guru. We'll talk more about that later. I just want to summarize the wisdom that has come down as best I can in these next few minutes. The first wise act that one can engage in is that one will begin to seek refuge in the Guru. Nama Guru Vaya. And why refuge in the Guru? Because the Guru, by definition, is a relationship that is based on truth. When you examine all other relationships that you find yourself in, none of those relationships are really predicated in truth. The vast majority of them is simply a strategy for you to alleviate your suffering. And the moment that relationship fails to function in the alleviation of your suffering, that relationship comes to an end. Fundamental. In your other relationships, there's always that politics going on. In those other relationships, you look, no one is really related to you for the pursuit of truth, for the attainment of real spirituality. It is all simply a matter of exploitation. Exploitation with the aim and objective of alleviating each other's suffering. It's only in the relationship with a Guru, with a spiritual teacher, that one really encounters truth, a relationship that is based on truth. And that is what makes it so uncomfortable, because in the relationship with the guru, you're going to get a reflection of yourself, a clear reflection than you will get in any other relationship. You remember last time I said that if you want to know something about the kind of human being you are, simply look in your relationships. Our relationships are like mirrors. They mirror our realities. However, in most of these relationships, that reality is obscured by the politics involved. And so the husband and the wife is really not going to speak truthfully to you, because there's something at risk. Now, too much truth is told, you may abandon. Of course, this is also the danger in the relationship with the guru as well. Hence, the relationship that one developed with the guru has been likened unto death. The guru is a murderer. The guru kills. And what is it that the guru kills? It kills ego. Because that is our biggest problem. It is our ego, this contraction, this preoccupation with ourselves, this phenomena that closes us up. And that is the first thing that has to be broken down. And so Guru Vaya, Namo Guru Vaya, refuge in the Guru, means simply that I take refuge in the satsang, refuge in the true relationship, refuge in the association with someone who is committed to me to tell me the truth. Period. No matter what's at risk. Without such a spiritual twin, there is no way to make any progress. That's all. Buddha said, therefore, seek refuge in the Guru. And remember, no dead Guru can help you. No past guru, however great, will be of any use to you. The guru must be someone that is alive in this human body just like you. The only exception is that they're in a relationship based on truth. They're not your husband, they're not your wife, they're not your brother, they're not your sister, they're not your pal, they're not your associate. They're none of these things. They have only one function, to act as a mirror, so that you may see yourself clearly. And it is this seeing out that serves as the foundation of spiritual development. Is this clear? The next thing that the masters and the Buddhas have said that will serve as genuine refuge from your confusion, your suffering, your misery, your sorrow, is the Dharma. Teachings. Nama Dharma Yah. Seek refuge in the teachings. Seek a refuge in the teachings. The teachings of all of these masters that have come down to us are a tremendous source of refuge. In them you will find solutions, answers to most of the problems that you are having in your life. Across the board. And so we should have the wisdom to take advantage of the refuge that these teachings afford us. And we should turn to the teachings of these great masters and these great saints, instead of turning to all of the other things that we turn into. Looking at your life, you'll see. What have you been seeking refuge in? Think about it. And has it given you any refuge? Has it really given you the peace? Has it really given you a stable state of mind that is free from sorrow and confusion? Look at it. And you've been seeking refuge in the teachings of so many other people in the world. And you've been seeking refuge in the teachings of your politicians and the teachings of your this and your that. Has it produced any lasting peace? And this is something that you have to look at. Buddha says, Nama Dharma Yah. Take refuge in the teachings. The teachings will give you peace. It will give you the insight. The third jewel, of course, is Nama Sangaya. Take refuge in the company of other seekers of truth. This perhaps is one of the greatest activities that we can engage in, is in keeping each other's company. With other seekers of truth, it takes on the same quality as our relationship with our guru, because these are seekers of truth. They're dedicated to truth. They're not going to bullshit you. And all these other relationships, they're simply going to bullshit you. They're going to tell you, oh, you this and oh, you that, and you all this and you all that. That's just bullshit. Pure bullshit. Only in the company of seekers of truth will you find those individuals who care enough for you not to continually deceive you. They will enter into a relationship with you that is way beyond bullshit and chicken shit and elevate you. They will not simply fan your ego. Nama Sangha Yah, the company of other seekers of the truth, is one of the greatest refuge that we can find as a solution to our suffering and our sorrow. So these then are just a few of the insights that these mystics have given us as it relates to dealing with this suffering and this sorrow. So now let us discuss anything that has been said, and let us go into this. Because again, this is something that you have to use your intelligence. On the path of the masters, there's never a time when you will not be called upon to use your own intelligence. It does not happen. That's the difference again in the relationship with the guru that distinguishes from the relationship with other people. The guru is constantly going to ask us to always use our intelligence. So let's use our intelligence now and let's look at this thing. We shouldn't just come together on a Sunday. I mean, there's so many other things you can be doing with your time. Yes, ma'am.
I know this is probably a Western phenomenon. The idea of not being able to find it comfortable to do the bhakti yoga. And for me, I guess it's perceptual. In that when you see the guru, you can see the guru's divinity, but somehow something in you perceives the humanness of the guru.
Yes.
So that dichotomy of seeing the divinity and yet seeing somehow what you perceive, because I'm sure it's perceptual.
Yes.
How do you get past that so that you can do the bhakti yoga?
Yeah, that is the first crisis that we all go through in developing our relationship to not only the guru but to the whole path in general. The first thing, of course, is that is the reaction of our ego. It is a recoiling of our ego. You have to remember, Pam, fundamentally, we all suffer from ego. We are on ego. Ego is like a drug. It affects us, much like a drug, in the sense that it causes us to contract, to recoil, to avoid relationship. You remember? Oh, you wasn't here. All right. So maybe you can see June or Dorothy or somebody that went through the series.
So last week?
Yeah, I got some of that. But we talked about the fact that one of the fundamental activities that you will observe in all of us is this failure to, and this avoidance of real relationship. We don't want to enter into real, authentic relationship. Remember, as I said before, that as we enter into relationships, that is always an ego-based ambition. We're entering into relationships always with the eye on how to use this other person in order to alleviate and gratify my own suffering, desires. It is always a matter of how they will be able to be used to alleviate my suffering, to take me out of my misery. We're really not in relationship to the person. You understand? We are focused in on me. This focusing in on me and this me being the basis of all our activity is what the mystics have called ego. This feeling that I am fundamentally separated from other people. Now this is an illusion. To exist is to be in relationship. See my point? So with this whole attitude, is the same thing that we bring to the path and to the guru. It's no different. When you look you will find that in all of your relationships there is this attitude. In every relationship that you have entered into, there is this pattern of activity. You see, there is this hesitation, this resistance to enter into full relationship, predicated on this or that. Now with this man, oh, he's a nice man and he's a loving man, but he's this, he's that, he's this. Oh, he's this, he's that, he's that. You will find some reason to pull back a little bit in that relationship. You follow me? You see, that is a habit of ego that has been formed in all of us. You see? And so certainly when we now come into relationship with the Guru and with the path, the same habit of contracting and recoiling is there. You see? Now we're looking for some way to rationalize the contraction, to pull it back. And that's okay. I am not condemning that. Understand that's natural. It's bound to happen. It is the first stage in the development. And so what usually happens when we enter into a relationship with the Guru or with the path, the very first crisis that we go through that is generated by this ego is this pulling back. Usually it comes in the form where we find something wrong with the Guru and the teachings. Now the Guru is this or the Guru is that and the Guru is not this. I remember one incident in India, city in Satsang with my own Guru Sahib. I remember overhearing a comment by one of the other seekers there that this master, you know what I mean, he can't really help me. Look, he still picks his nose. You see? So their whole faith crumbled because the master picked their nose. You see? But this has been the case with all masters. Even if Buddha, if you was with Jesus, if you were with Muhammad, if you were with Mahavira, if you were sitting at the feet of Krishna, if you were sitting at the feet of Patamatel, you would still find some problem. You would still find something wrong with the individual. If not with the individual, then you'll find something wrong with the teachings. Why? Because the teachings will interfere with your ego projects. And so, fam, that is natural in all of us. Nothing to be worried about. You see? At all. It is a natural reaction that we all have to the Guru teachings. We first recoil. And if we can make it through that crisis, we grow a little bit. Unfortunately, many of us cannot make it through that first crisis. We hit up against the boundaries, right? And then we pull back, you see, and then we move on to some other aspect of our life, you see. Now we're going to look for another Guru, another set of teachings, you see. And in this way we spend our whole life just moving from one Guru and one set of teaching to another Guru, another set of teaching, so forth and so on. We never come to rest. You see, we never get down. We never do any real solid. You see, we're exploring. We're exploring. And everything we encounter comes up short. And it comes up short fundamentally because of our ego. We do not wish to really enter into authentic relationship. And that is an aspect of all of our relationships. That is the thing that is so important to see, Pam, is that when we look very closely, and that's why self-observation is essential. Self-knowledge, know thyself. The ancient African mystics wrote across the temples in Karnak, know thyself. They wrote it 3,000 years before Socrates even heard the term. Why? Because knowledge of oneself is fundamental. And you cannot have knowledge of yourself without observing yourself. Please make a note of that. I want to emphasize that. Without observing yourself in relationships, you will never have any insight into yourself. It is not possible. It has never happened. You can't know yourself studying books. You can't know yourself coming to these kind of meetings. It's just a waste of time if you think that this is a substitution for self-observation. It is not a substitution for self-observation. There is no substitution for your intelligent observation of your own life. There is none. And when you make this kind of intelligent observation of your own life, the first thing that you will see is the patterns of your ego. This is interesting. And then you will see how you are at all times recoiling and contracting in relationships. You're trying to separate yourself, isolate yourself, separate your life from the lives of other people. Now, this is not possible. How is that possible? It is all interconnected, interdependent. There is no separation. Separation is an illusion. It is an optical illusion that occurs in consciousness. The reality is that we're all connected. And therefore we have to relate. That's what satsang means. Sat means true. Sang means association or relationship. Satsang means true relationship. And so naturally then, when we encounter the teachings in the Buddha for the first time, we naturally encounter this ego. And that is one of the tasks that we all are challenged with. You see? But it's not something that you should feel that's wrong with you. Nothing wrong with you. Other than your ego, of course, but we all have egos. No problem. So that's the first level. Now if we can get past that, then we enter into a second level of the crisis. This is interesting. The second level of crisis is that once we got past that, it's just almost the reverse. Oh, the guru is too high for me, and the teachers are too high for me, and I can't do this stuff. You see my point? Now it's another game that the ego is playing. The ego is saying, well, this is too high. The teachings is too high. There's nothing wrong with the teachings. There's nothing wrong with the guru, but there's something wrong with me. I am too inadequate. Now what they've done is denied the whole basis of their sovereignty. They denied their own divinity. They denied their own Buddha nature. You see? They are now forfeiting their own God potentiality. And again, the whole disguise is to hang on to the ego activities. Now the teachers is too high and all of this stuff here, and meditation is right, but I can't handle this stuff. I'm just messed up. It's very subtle, because now the ego will embark on a journey to get themselves together. It's an illusion. I'm going to pursue spiritual path. I'm going to do real sadhana, but first I'm going to get myself together. Now look at what this getting yourself together really consists of. Look at it closely. And what you will find is just more ego studies. Just more ego studies. So the ego is the problem. It is the only problem that exists on the path. There is no other problem. And again, this ego is this fundamental refusal to relate. Ego is your insistence on trying to remain separate and isolated. This is the fundamental barrier on the path. All other obstacles on the path emerge from this one fundamental thing. And you cannot see your ego by reading a book. I'm saying to you something very radical. I'm suggesting a very radical form of understanding that will require you to look at yourself. You don't want to look at yourself. You want to do everything else but look at yourself. You don't mind if I gave you, say, okay, now go read all of the Vedas. You'll go by Vedas as soon as this meeting is over with. And you will go through them and struggle through them, trying to get a glimpse, trying to get an insight. You have read the Quran front to cover. You've read the Bible, front to cover. You're doing all of these things, avoiding the one activity that will really generate self-knowledge, which is observing yourself in your relationships. Not only in your relationship to other human beings, but in your relationship, period. Your relationship to your material possession, your relationships to nature, your relationship to observe the whole process that is going on. That will produce knowledge. That will produce wisdom. That will give you an insight into your ego. You see? And just seeing this thing, just seeing it, nothing else needs to be done. That's the beauty of this path. The path is predicated on understanding and intelligence. Nothing else is required. In fact, all of this meditation and stuff is simply a substitution, a crutch, something for you to use until you become intelligent. Yes, sister.
Yeah, I was looking at the shape, not last week, but the previous week, and a light went on because I had never quite understood the meaning of the ego. And I studied it in school. But when you said that the ego is an activity, it just opened up for me. Now I better understand what it is because I can tell you, Barbara. You know, you've been using it so often.
Yes, yes.
But I guess maybe that was part of myself, a part of myself that was trying not to understand it. Maybe, I don't know. But that definition just really gave me a different way of looking at it.
Shifting of this thought.
Yeah, a different way of understanding. Now that I know that it's an activity, I know that one of the things I have to do is to watch it.
Absolutely.
To watch it.
That's the whole point. If the insight does not result in you turning your attention to watching that, then it would have done no good. Ego is not a thing. People say, I'm trying to drop my ego. It's not a thing. It's an activity. It is a process that you are engaging in continuously. Continuously. And we have to begin to observe the activity that the mystics have called ego. And this is the heart of the matter. This is the heart of the teachings. And this is where the journey begins. And so, these are just a few of the preliminary things that we have to understand. At least this much understanding has to be. And again, all of this activity of the ego is motivated out of one urge, to avoid suffering. You do not want to suffer. In fact, you do not want to suffer, nor do you want to die. And you're going to die. Yes, brother?
So, saying that the ego is the activity, and that's what wants to avoid the suffering,
Yes.
and to avoid dying.
Yes.
But this activity or ego is in fact an illusion.
Yes.
So, why it's not the ego, but I'm involved in that activity.
Mm.
And that activity itself is the suffering.
Absolutely.
And what I desire is to relieve myself of that activity.
The ego desires that. Once the ego is dropped, there's nothing else to do. One of the insights we have to understand that there's never been a moment or time when you have really been separated from what we call God. That's not even possible. The separation is only in awareness. It's not real. It's not existential. There is no such thing as separation from God. Has never existed. To be separate from God means to not exist at all. But if you exist, by definition, you exist within the context called God, by definition. Yet there is the illusion that we are separate, right? And the identification with that separateness, you see, that shuts down the actual experience of being in God, which is by definition defined as Sat Chidananda, bliss, right? All knowledge, right? All this power, all this stuff, that is our very nature. We exist. Happiness is your very condition. It's not, you don't have to do anything to attain happiness. The problem is stop doing stuff and you will automatically be happy. It's a very radical insight. Happiness is your natural state. Happiness is not an action. It is a willful state. You can't do anything to be happy. In fact, you're trying to be happy is what is causing the misery. Do you understand? It is deep wisdom. You have to reflect. You cannot understand it like you're going to understand a quadratic equation. It's not math. You have to look and understand. look into your life, observe yourself, and you will understand. There is no other way. There is no way to figure it out with your intellect. There is no way to analyze it into understanding. You have actually to look and see. And all mystics have agreed across the board on this one fundamental point, that by your very nature you are already heaven. Because by your very nature you are God. You see the So you have to look, Brother Wade. You're absolutely right in terms of your insights, that it is this activity of this ego. Again, you have to look. You have to look into your life. I don't want it to simply remain at an academic level, because that is of no value. Right? But you have to actually look at your life and see this activity constantly going on. It's not, you're not suffering because of something you've done yesterday. You're suffering because you are presently engaging in the ego activity. You understand? It is this ego activity that is the root and foundation of the suffering. Right? There is nothing done yesterday. There's whatever you did yesterday, there's no reason for you to be suffering today. That's all. No causal necessity. It is this constant activity called ego that we're engaged in. And how to break that becomes difficult. Natural. And that is the whole purpose of the path. That is the whole purpose of
Jimbo, please contact the Curtis staff.
You see my point? That is the function of meditation. Meditation has no other function. If you are very intelligent, you need not do any meditation. Let me be clear on this point. Meditation is only necessary for us because our intelligence is submerged underneath this ego activity. If it was not, then there would be no need for us to enter into any yoga and meditation and discipline and all these other things. All of these are simply aids to help resurrect our own inherent intelligence. Because you can't see yourself. So now you got to be slowed down. We have to slow down the ego activity. It is moving so fast, you can't see it. You don't have enough awareness. It's so subtle. You don't have that much concentration. You can't even focus on yourself. You can focus outside yourself. No problem. You can look at other people. No problem. But you cannot monitor your thoughts. You cannot monitor your feelings. You can't even monitor your body. The awareness is not developed enough. So we have to use meditation and yoga to help develop self-awareness. And that is the whole point. And so through a process of meditation, and that's why the mystics have always put so much emphasis on meditation. They're saying that you have got to recover this kind of sensitivity. And the only way that you can begin, we got to slow you down. So now, take a posture. We start with posture first. We sit you down in a posture, in an asana, right? And so now, master this asana. Be still, physically. Just be still. Make this body still. Slow it up, right? Slow it down. Slow it down. And then as you sit in your asana, sit in just the physical aspect of meditation. Gives you much insight. You start encountering all your tendencies. Most of us, the problem of what we can't even get our bodies down on to sit. It is so caught up in that activity, isn't it? Now you sit for 5 or 10 minutes and you're so antsy. You say, you got to get up, you got to do something, you're about to explode. It's almost like killing you. That pull of that ego activity that involves the physical use of your body is so strong. And you can't see it until you actually sit. And then you see for the first time, my God. My God. The masters then say, okay, now we have to discipline this mind, slow it down. And so we begin by using a mantra. What you really beginning to see is that all of this process is to enable us to really see the activity of the ego and then to take our attention off ourselves. That is the whole strategy. When you take your attention off yourself, what is it that you become? When you cease identifying yourself with this illusion of separateness, when that drops, what is that replaced with? What happens to your identity? Grady will help us out here.
Well, based on what you said, you become one with all.
Right. Ahambre masi. Anukasa. That realization comes in. You really discover that I am God. Everyone that has dropped the ego, with no exception, have made this one statement. Hatwamasi. I am God. Sounds blasphemous. And many of these mystics were killed for making that statement. Natural. Understandable. But the point is that that was the emerging reality that all people have had who have been able to transcend and drop this ego. Once the drop cease believing it is a drop, it automatically recovers its awareness that it is the ocean. That is the objective of meditation. Through meditation, eventually, that we work hard at this, we hang in there. And it's not an easy thing. But if you hang in there, a time comes when this ego dissolves and the identity just merges with the ocean. Yes, sister?
How do you know when you're not acting on ego?
How do you know when you're not acting on ego? Well, I think you can almost answer that. Keep going with it.
I'm not sure. Because I don't know if you're saying...
If you're not sure, then that means you're still acting on ego. It's almost like asking the question, sister, how do you know when you have awakened? It is a self-evident experience. You see my point? It is self-evident. But I'll answer your question in another way, in terms of experience. When you have begun to transcend that ego, you will, for the first time, you'll notice that your suffering comes to an end. If you are still suffering, if you are still being disappointed, if you are still confused, if there's still misery and sorrow in your life, know that the ego is alive and well. These are the symptoms of being strung out on ego. You see my point? You still have all these problems. You're still very confused. You're still trying to manipulate things in order to alleviate your suffering. This is an ego activity. This is symptomatic of an ego. When ego is dissolved, then one simply comes to a state of rest. There is no more suffering.
Can you pick the ego back up?
Sure. Why not? Of course. Ego has a function. Don't misunderstand me. These mystics have access to all of the entire totality of being. Certainly. It's just like picking up the mind. You see? You need this mind to talk, to communicate. We're using the mind to do this, right? So these becomes tools that can be used, certainly.
So the ego is necessary.
Certainly the ego is necessary. Certainly it's a tool, it's an instrument. It is something to be used as such. The problem is your total identification with it. It's like clothes. Now we all have on clothes, but we know these are not us. At least I hope you understand that these clothes are not you, right? They're something you're using, right? We have shoes, we're using these things. These are things we use, they're not us. We understand that distinction. The ego of mind, imagination, all of these things are like that. So, it is a very different thing. Anything else? Yes, sister?
Okay, you said that people are really told that they don't have to meditate. Well,
I shouldn't have said that, should I, Dorothy?
Well, okay, assuming that's true, then what happens to those people when they go through the bar door then? Would they become instantly enlightened and they wouldn't have to go through the bar door?
Yes, yes. For those of you who don't know about Bardot, the Bardots are the Tibetan terms that are used to define the different transitional states that we go through, right? Like this is the Bardot of living, for instance, right? Where we're in transition to the next state of being, which is death, dying, etc., etc. Dorothy's question is that those who have developed intelligence, right, do they undergo the Bardot of dying in the painful way as it has been described? Absolutely not, because we're talking about real intelligence, right? When one has resurrected one's intelligence, it is the same, it produces enlightenment. You see, you can attain enlightenment through what we call Gyanyo, right? Just through sheer intelligence, not intellect. Making a distinction. Intelligence. How do I define intelligence? Intelligence is the ability to observe oneself and everything else. That's intelligence, right? To observe, to see. Now, Dorothy, when we can see that all of this drama that is going on around us is essentially Maya, essentially unreal, impermanent. One of the problems is this, isn't it? That because we have this ignorance in our minds, in us, we're not able to see, even at the level of ego, that everything that you are trying to manipulate, everything that you are trying to do to alleviate your suffering will fail because everything that you are grasping in is impermanent. It has no substantial reality whatsoever. It is a projection of your own mind. Seeing that, you cease gravity. Now, what happens in the Bhagwan of dying, Dorothy, that makes it so painful? It is that the ignorance is there, right? The attachments that we develop to all these people. The discovery that, my God, I'm losing my whole world. That's something. You know how upset you get when you lose your job. That just discombobulates you, throws you all out of whack, causes so much suffering. In the Bardot of dying, you're going to lose this whole world. You're going to even lose your physical body. You lose in all relationships, and you remain conscious. And if you are under the illusion, you see, that is typical of most of us, that illusion is going to generate much suffering, much suffering. But if our intelligence has been there, right? Then we can see that this is all as unreal. What you begin to see, Dorothy, is that all of the events that are going on in the Bardot of dying are as unreal as the events going on. That this is all Maya, all impermanent, and it does not cause it to react at all. The other way, of course, is to have developed this capacity through your meditation. I recommend we should go for the meditation, and we shouldn't. That kind of intelligence is very rare, very rare. But we have to develop this kind of ability through meditation, through our meditation practices, where we're able to sit now in our wisdom at the time of death. But the whole point of meditation is that to be able to sit in one's wisdom at the time of death. To rest in this requires the Buddhists call it. To rest in this wisdom and to understand. You see, we have to understand what is happening to us at the time of death. But how will you understand what is happening to you at the time of death when you can't understand what is happening to you at this time of living? You do not understand what's happening to you. You don't have a clue. You have no idea at all what's going on. And so you won't be able to understand that at all. You've not understood living. You've not understood the fundamental mistake of ego at all. You have not understood your suffering. You've not figured out any of this stuff yet. You're confused, running hither and thither out of that confusion. Certainly, when the time of death comes, Sister, at the time of entering into this Bhagwan of God, the misery that we're experiencing now, the suffering that we're experiencing now is multiplied sevenfold. The intensity is much greater. Much greater. Much greater. That's why Patal Rinpoche, the great Buddhist mystic, said that you must practice in this Bhagwan of living. You must get this right. Remember, death is not optional for anybody. And you're going to die. I don't care what you call yourself. Buddhist, Hindu, Muslim, Afrocentric. All of these are just labels on the surface. None of that stuff goes past you. At the time of death, it's not going to matter what the hell you call yourself. It's all. And there will be no time to look it up in the book. There will be no way to run to some meeting somewhere. None of that stuff is going to help you. Either you have got the insight or you don't have the insight. Either you have been practicing meditation and achieved it, or you've just been blessed with natural intelligence. Now don't play games with yourself. Don't start thinking, well, you know, Bhagwan, I got this intelligence. Because look at the suffering in your life. See, I don't want you to run with that. You see, I want to give you a way to really, truly examine and make sure that you don't put yourself accidentally in the same category with a Buddha, right? Or with a Mahavir. Because I know we all have that tendency to promote ourselves when it comes to these things. But I want you to fundamentally to see is that our problem is that our intelligence is at a very, 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 very submerged level. And we have got to get this meditation. Because as Dorothy pointed out, the Bhagwan of dying is hospital. And you are not going to be able to handle it. You can't even handle life. And you can't run away from it. That's the whole activity of the ego. Ego tries as best it can to repress the awareness of death. That is an ego function. Ego's whole activity is fueled by the belief that you will not die. That's fundamental for the ego to run full pedal. I'm going to have plenty of time. You're under the illusion of time. In fact, you don't want to die. What you're looking for is some kind of path, some kind of teaching, some kind of religion that allows you to survive. Is this ego, but forever? That's not going to happen. This thing is over with. This ego is out of here. You see? Yes, no?
So what I'm hearing you say is that the ego, this activity, is seeking to continue forever.
Right. It is the ego that is involved in religion. It is the ego that is involved in the spiritual path initially. You're on this, you respond to these teachings, you're looking for a guru and all of this stuff, because you're looking for someone or some path that will help preserve your ego forever after death. That is not going to happen. That is not going to happen. And yet this is what you really are looking for. That's really what you want. You want to exist forever as Bhagwan, or as Dr. Peace, or as Brother Kenyatta, or as Satra, or as Khufu, or as Pam. That is not going to happen. You want to sit somewhere outside of time and space, look back down on this birth, because you don't know nothing about your past life. You think this is the first time you're here, but you want to sit from your imaginary region, spiritual region, and looking at your wife and your children as they grow up. This is all nonsense. That is not going to happen. You are out of here. That is it. This ego, this identity that you got, this is a one-shot phenomenon. Think about it. You've had millions of identities. You've had an identity in each incarnation, haven't you? You have no recall of that ability. But in that incarnation, when you were thinking you were, instead of Rose, you was a John then. And in that incarnation, Rose, as John, you did the same thing. John tried to, right, live forever as John. Where is John? Gone. You don't even remember. It's the same will be the case with Rose. She's out of it. You see? She's out of it. And that is what makes the bardo of dying so painful, because the bardo of dying really essentially is your conscious experiencing of the dissolution of your ego. It is painful. It is like being eaten alive. Have you seen in the wilderness when animals are caught by a predator? Have you watched that? Some of you seen it on TV, I'm sure. A lion now grabs the wildebeest and just start eating it. Just start eating it. Wow. And the wildebeest is screaming and kicking. The wildebeest is being eaten while alive. That is what death does. Death eats your ego while you are alive. And it is horrendous. The suffering is immense. Death will eat you alive. Will eat up this rose, eat up this Bhagwan, eat up this Kafu, eat up this Bhagwan, eat up Kenyatta, eat up Gurumach, eat up, will eat you all alive. Samurai will eat you while you live. That is painful. But it is not going anywhere. It is profound. Yes, sister.
In African systems, they talk about the belief in ancestor worship. They believe that once their loved ones have died, their ancestors are still with them. And so is that superstition? The belief that their departed loved ones are watching over them and have love for them and guide them. Is that untrue?
Well, you see, sister, you have to know more about the bardos. You have to know more about what happens now after death, after the dissolution of things, during the rebirth period, and all of these other things. You have to begin to understand that when a person dies, they don't even know they're dead. That's the first thing. Strange, right? It takes a while to realize that you're dead, right? And in that sense, you see, these ancestors of ours are still lingering on. But then it depends on what you call an ancestor. The ancestor is not the name of the individual. Although in African tradition they try to keep the name alive. The African tradition said that as long as someone remembers the ancestor's name, that ancestor lives. Right? But that ancestor lives where? In this person's mind. You understand? That ancestor has already reincarnated as a snake that was running across the earth. You understand? Don't confuse cultural tradition. And you have to understand something about all ancient Africans were not enlightened, obviously. And just as today, you have a lot of people who are practicing a form of Christianity that is about as full of superstition as anything you can imagine. The same was the case in African times. The Ra system, the Osirian systems, you see, had collapsed. They had collapsed even before Mrs. hooked up the two lanes. You understand? Spirituality was already on the wane. You understand? And so a lot of these practices that came down was a corruption and a misunderstanding of the reality. The relationship that we have with ancestors, however, can be looked at on a different level. The understanding is that we are always in relationship. I talked about the fact that we have to see our relationships. But these relationships, you see, are not just confined to this physical plane. We're in total relationship to the cosmos. And that ancestor, that grandmother of yours, is still a part of the cosmos. She's not going nowhere. Where is she going? You know, now Grandma Jean is gone, that's for sure. But the consciousness that was underlying the personality called Grandma Jean is still in existence. It might have taken another form by now. You see my point? The ancestors are not somewhere up there. The ancestors are out here. The person next to you, Pam, was once your ancestor. And that is how we have to look at it. I would love to see that if we can treat each other just like we treat the ancestors, how much closer we will be to real African spirituality. Because in fact, you know, that person next to you have been an ancestor. The ancestors are constantly coming back in our lives in the form of our children, our loved ones, our neighbors, so forth and so on. Isn't that true? Now, it's one thing to worship the memory of an ancestor, right? It's a very another thing to relate to ancestors as they are coming back over and over again to our families. Let's take a break. Oh, Buddha Maji, you are in on your question?
No, I'll just ask you this time. I would like to take a break. This is something that's
Ah.
necessary.
All right, let's take a quick 2-minute break and then let's resume and then we'll finish up for today. One or two of you at least were interested in the initiation. And so what you should do if you are interested in the initiation, I think after we finish today, I'll go over here in the little cafeteria area, right where they have the coffee machine, and we'll sit there and I will talk to you and we'll put together a time, place, and etc. And we'll go from there. But in any event, we'll finish up whatever we can finish up in the next half an hour or so. And again, taking any route you like. Yes,
Okay.
Sister Dorothy.
This is another Bhagwan question.
Yes, good. I love to talk more questions. Huh?
I can't help it. Now, about meditation and learning how to deal with the Bardo. Now, suppose you're a person who's going to be on that path a little time and you haven't become enlightened, but you're trying to meditate. I mean, doesn't that count for something? Will that ease your suffering a little bit? I'm serious. I mean,
the Bardos make you very serious, don't they?
yes.
Well, you see, the only thing that relieves suffering in the Bardo is the level of skill you have attained as it relates to meditation. It makes no exception. You see? It's skill. If you have unfortunately been initiated and have done one day of meditation, you see, you're still going to undergo some stuff in the Bardo. The question is, will it help a little bit? I think I've illustrated that by way of a story, and if I may, Dorothy, I'll tell it again. And the story is about the mother of Sariputta. Sariputta, if you recall, was one of the disciples of the Buddha who attained enlightenment as a result of following Buddha's instructions. And after he had attained enlightenment, you know, Sariputta, like all people who have attained enlightenment, was filled with compassion and wanted to help as all sentient beings also to attain the state of enlightenment. That is one of the characteristics of one who has become enlightened. You see, they reach out to others. They don't isolate themselves. There is no ivory tower going on. You see, with that enlightenment comes waves of compassion that forces you, literally, to reach back and to help all other struggling sentient beings to also attain. And Sariputta was non-discriminating in that effort, and he even wanted his mother to attain enlightenment, you see. And so one of the mantras that the Buddha used in the training of attention was the Om Pani Mani Om mantra. And so Sariputta wanted to have his mother start practicing this mantra as a means of developing the meditative state of the mind. Okay? And of course his mother was not hearing none of that. You see, his mama was quite a different kind of person with a whole entirely different set of karma, and she didn't want to be involved in this Buddha nonsense and all of this other stuff. And Sariputta, you know, again, driven out of his compassion, wanted so much to be of some benefit to his mother. But what could he do if she was refusing to do any meditation, any sadhana? So kept harassing her, and finally she agreed to one thing. And Sadhguru said, look, okay, Mom, I know that you're not going to really seriously apply yourself to meditation. But he said, I'll put a bell over the kitchen door, okay? And would you just do this much for me? Every time you go through the kitchen and that bell's ring, would you repeat this mantra? Pari Mani Hum. And he said, okay, boy, I'll do this, but you better leave me alone, and I don't want to ever hear you say nothing else to me about no Buddha, no teachers, no nothing, right? And so they made the deal. And so Sadhguru kept his bargain. He did not harass her anymore from that day on. And she kept her part of the bargain. Every time she would go into the kitchen and the little bell would ring, she would say the mantra, you see, and then go on about her business. She would just say it one time. It turned out, though, that at the time of her death, her karma was such that she went into one of the hell realms. You understand? And as she entered into the hell realms, and they were preparing her cauldron of boiling metal, because that's what happened to the beings who go into the hell realm, right? And so they were stirring up that molten lead and stuff, getting it real nice and hot for her. And like a cook, one of the devils down there hit the side of the pot to knock the dross off that spoon, right? You know how you do, like cooking soup. And as it did that, it made a bell sound, and she repeated the mantra Om Pari Mani Hum, and immediately that whole scene shifted, and she wound up being born in the pure land of Buddha. So that is the power of one repetition, right? So I can't say that it all goes to waste, right? But unless your son is a Sadhguru, I wouldn't bank on that. But your question is well put. That is what brings the urgency to the practice, isn't it? Because we don't know when we're going to be entering into this bardo. And so the moment that we are given the instructions for meditation, the moment we are given the means of developing the skill that will enable us to rest in our wisdom at this traumatic event called death, right? That is why it's so important not to waste any time with that. But the truth of the matter is that your suffering will be proportional to your lack of skillfulness. And therefore, in this bardo, we must develop that skill of taking our attention off of all of the phenomena that is going on around us. All of the phenomena that is occurring within the context of our consciousness now. All of the distractions in this world. You see how distracted we are? You see, our attention is distracted by this, distracted by that, and we don't have any control or management of it, right? In the same way, if we enter into the painful bardo of death, and we still lack the ability to manage our attention, then we have no other perforce but to undergo the experiences that is going to be generated. You see my point? You cannot withdraw from phenomena. And it just that phenomenon at the time of death is going to be far more brutal and painful and frightening than this phenomenon. Now, some of us, of course, are scared of this phenomenon called life. You can only imagine how much more terrified you will be in the phenomenon called death, right? When all of your fears and phobias begin to descend and emerge upon you. So we better develop the skill to pull our minds out of that. Now, yes, Brother Fred?
So, this, Father, into that kind of thing. But if we're able to withdraw from the phenomenon, then this ego asked this question.
That's okay.
Then
that'll be my ego answer.
Good. then when we naturally gonna go on to another life.
Yes.
Then without all that pain, we may even remember something of this other incarnation.
Yes, 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 yes.
So to that degree, the ego would continue to exist.
The ego will, even going through the bardo of dying, at his death it dissolves.
Right, it is dissolved.
Now, what happens on the other side of death, the reformation of ego takes place again. But it'll be a different ego, right? But it starts off with a little recall from this previous birth, right? But as you move further into the bardo, they call it the Dhamata bardo. As you move further into that bardo, and enter into what they call the Sipo Bhagwan, the Bhagwan of becoming rebirth. You lose all recall. You see? And a whole new personality, a whole new ego, a whole new body, all that stuff gets formed. But there is, a resurgence, right, of that whole thing. Even in the Bhagwan of dying, you can sometimes get a glimpse of some of the previous stuff from this, prior to this birth. The interesting thing about these Bhagwan teachings is this, is that what and who were you prior to the time before you become great? I mean, it is as if we think that this all just started with Bhagwan or with Grady or with June. No. What is all of these unanswered questions about your prior existence? What happened in the previous Bhagwan to this one? You see my point? What happened in your last encounter in the sequel Bhagwan prior to this one? Right? Where is that personality in? What was his life in? Was it even a he? You might have been a woman. We don't know, right? So all of this stuff goes on. You see? All of it goes on. But Dorothy, the question is focused on right to the point, because we do know the next Bhagwan from this one is the Bhagwan of dying. That's the order. You see? And that is the next real challenge that we are all headed for. And we have to get prepared for that. It is very interesting that we prepare for all other kind of eventuality. And none of us are seriously preparing ourselves for this one event that you know is going to go down. And that is madness. Yes, Sister Rose.
You made a statement and stating that you don't realize that you did. What do you mean? It takes a while.
What happens sometimes, you see, let's say if you got sudden and you just flash through all of the stages. Because again, if you are too undeveloped, you won't even pick up any of that stuff at all. And your life ends suddenly, abrupt, right? And it's like you go unconscious for a while, and then you wake up from that unconsciousness. Much like you wake up each morning from a deep sleep, and you wake up again, and you wake up with all these old memories and association in your mind. You don't know that death has happened yet, you see. And you still think you are alive. That is the tragedy that happens to so many of us. That when we enter into these after life Bhagwan, without the realization that we are dead, we're still trying to get back into our old life. You will see your wife, your husband, your children, your family. I mean, all of it, you will feel like you have a body. I mean, it will be all the same experience, you see. Just as this experience is real, the Bhagwan experience feels just like the reality of this experience. It is not less real than this. I mean, it actually feels real, just like this feels real. But here's the interesting thing. This itself is a Bhagwan. See, this is deep. You have to see Dorothy on this. The reality, Dorothy is the house Bhagwan expert. Right? The reality is that you are having this whole experience that you call living from the same spot that you will be having the experience of death, from the same spot that you will have the experience of rebirth and everything. You are having all of that experience from that place already. This whole experience that you're going through is occurring from that same place. There is no movement. It's a deep thing. It's a deep thing. And that is why the mystics say that you have to begin by understanding that this Bhagwan and all of the stuff that is going on in this Bhagwan is unreal. That same understanding is what enables you to go through the next Bhagwan after this one. It is the understanding that this stuff is ultimately not real, nor independent of my own mind. That it's simply arising in my own mind. You see? It's a very profound thing. For instance, what is it that caused us to react to all of the drama that is going on and the phenomena that we call life? Is because we feel that this is really real. If you didn't feel that it was really real, you wouldn't be going through all this suffering, right? Would you? No, none of us would. But our suffering experience to be real. Real in the sense that it is permanent, substantial. You understand? The master said that this is an experience that is very similar to the experience of a rainbow. Now a rainbow appears, you can see it. But when you reach out to touch it, there's nothing there. He said in the same way, all of this drama that you see going on around you appears to be real, but only appears. And when you reach out, grasping it, trying to extract happiness from it, it all disappears. Now you meet somebody, and it appears that, man, if I could just hook up with this brother, I'm going to be straight. I mean, it really appears like that. I mean, and you are intelligent, you examine it closely. Well, you got a job, you got good education, you ain't on no drugs. I mean, you do your checklist thing. And for all practical purposes, it really appears that this man or woman, or whatever the case may be, really will be able to alleviate this thing, right? This experience that we have called suffering. And then you reach and you grab them, and nothing happens. In that sense, the mystics say that this whole drama is unreal. You see, it is not substantial. It is impermanent. It is not lasting. You see my point? But we cannot understand that. Hence, Patrol Rinpoche says that the essence of the practice for the Bhagwan of this life, the sadhana that has to be perfected in this Bhagwan, he said, is developing the ability to look upon the infinite variety of experiences as nothing more than a dream. See, as nothing more than a projection from one's own mind. Right? Seeing this, one must rest in the wisdom of one's own rhythm. Seeing that, one comes to a rest in wisdom. Now, how do you see that? Well, the way you see that is through self-observation. You have to observe. It's amazing, Rose, that we are not observing anything. I mean, now this is really strange. We're in the midst of all of this stuff, and none of us have paused for one moment to observe and examine this thing. Have you thought about it? Have you really paused and really looked closely at this drama that you're going through called life? Look closely into your relationship. I mean, really look closely. Really observe. See what's going on. When you see that, a great understanding arises, and a great wisdom arises. You begin to see how things are just moving. Right? Nothing is permanent. Now you see that this one day, your husband criticizes you. And you've been reacting to that stuff, getting all upset. But if you had watched, you would have seen that one day he criticized you. 2 days later, he's praising you. Then 2 more days, he criticized you. And 3 days later, he praised. You begin to see the instability and impermanence of how that person in relationship with you is. You see? And therefore, then you don't react no more. Because it ain't real, in the sense that it lasts. You see my point? Nothing lasts. Everything is in flux. Everything is in motion. Seeing this, you rest in that wisdom. Meaning that you start resting. You see? There's no more clinging. Right? No more delusion. And if you've been watching yourself, then you would just see that every 3 or 4 days, you just get pissed off. Then 3 or 4 days go away, you calm down. You just begin to see the cycle of your own emotion. It has nothing to do with your manipulation of anything outside. At all. You just begin to see the movement of your own mind. You have to see the activities of your own mind. And nobody can see that for you. You must actually do the looking. And so, Dorothy, once we develop this capacity to watch, then we simply watch them. Disinterested from that same position of wisdom. You simply watch. And that thing that is watching does not die. You see? It's quite a different phenomenon. And even as this body dissolves and you go into the next dharmamata, you watch the reemergence of the body. You'll watch it. At all times you will see. You're seeing all of this. And yes, things happening because of karma and all this, but you watch it. You're a seer. You are essentially a seer. You become that seer. You're not attached to or recoiling from anything. You're watching. And that's the only way to relate to things. That's what I mean when I say truly relate. To be in a relationship truly means that I'm aware of you. You're in a relationship with a woman, you don't even know this woman. What's up with that? How can you call it a relationship? This is your wife, you're in a relationship, you don't know nothing about the woman. That's all. Yes, you know some superficial things on a superficial level, but you never observed. You really have never looked at her. You don't understand her. And because you don't understand, hence the conflict. All conflict is a result of failure to understand. If you understand, how can there be any conflict? But you cannot understand unless you look. So all of this then depends on our capacity to observe. And if we can do that, then not only will we be able to take this ability into the next barcode, but we'll have it forever, no matter what's going on. So we have to start with this barcode. Everything starts with this barcode, this living barcode that we're in, what we do with it, how we handle it. And that again becomes the function of meditation, isn't it? You see? Meditation is a great opportunity. Yes, Jude?
So we don't take aspects of our ego into the new reformation?
Only as we emerge momentarily in that. We have these old memories, but all of that eventually drops off. The only thing that we take from one life to the next life, June, is tendencies. Tendencies, what we call some style. Did we talk about that? All right, you'll make sure that June gets the tape because we want to make sure, because I won't be able to reproduce it all. But it's like tendencies. Now you was asking how did karma come into it? Karma is nothing but the expression of tendencies. We all have created certain tendencies through habitually engaging in certain activities, right? I mean, you do a thing over and over again, right? That sets up a habit. That sets up a tendency. Now you are predispositioned to behave a certain way, right? This predisposition is the ground from which karma emerges. Karma means action, right? Your actions emerge from this condition, this tendency, what we call some skaras. And it is these some skaras and tendencies that are embedded at the level of mind that translates and transmigrate. Because you're carrying the same mind, you're not carrying the same ego. Make a distinction, right? You have ego and you have mind. They're different phenomena. When you examine them very closely, right? The ego will drop, but the mind, the deposits of this ego and all egos that you've ever had are laid out on your mind. You understand? So in this lifetime, in your mind, you are carrying the impressions from the ego activities from every life you ever lived in, right? Now Rose, Rose, there was a couple of those lifetimes that we really got to look at now.
So is that how people, is that what they mean when they, deja vu?
Deja vu experiences where look like you know this person, you've been there before, now you know you've not ever been there in this lifetime. Where is this coming from? It is coming out of some of this stuff that was stored, seeds, some scars. You see, it's there. Certain tendencies that you bring. Now some people are just born in this life and they have great musical skills. Now they never taken any lesson, they just, you know, these Mozarts and Chopins and people like that, just sit down and compose music. How is that happening? You see, the tendencies is there. We also bring negative tendencies as well as positive tendencies. You see, and some people bring in tendencies to kill. Now they're just good at killing. You see my point? They have that tendency. That's some stuff. So doing what is transmigrating from bottle to bottle is the mind and those tendencies in the mind. And the mind is constantly generating a form that enables it to express these tendencies. The mind is what creates the body. The body is a physical form of mind.
So this mind is a series of impressions from previous.
Experiences. Yeah. Whenever consciousness has an experience, it records it in the mind. Right? And that creates tendencies. Right? It's profound. You will have to really kind of sit and study it a little bit. There's a lot of literature on that now. And I'll make it a point to try to remember some of those books. Because you really have to kind of study to get an insight into it. It's not so easy as to be able to lend itself to a quick discourse. But the basic phenomenon that's going on here, consciousness is having an experience. That experience is being recorded in mind. Mind is setting up tendencies, right? Mind now creates forms and so forth and so on. And you're all the way out to this drama. Great, you got it, right?
The question is that the ego is activity.
The ego is that activity.
Okay. Mind creates activity.
Yes.
And I guess the question that came up is that since the ego is activity and the mind creates activity, so when we go to the next incarnation, and we carry the same mind, or the entity that I am, which is the same mind, which is available to everybody, the tendencies create the action or create the activity, which creates the new ego.
Right. There you go.
That makes sense.
Yes. The tendencies create the activities that generate the ego. The new ego. Because remember, there's billions and trillions and zillions. I don't even know a number large enough to indicate the amount of tendencies. Infinite tendencies, man, going.
And so,
Go ahead.
so by learning to meditate, I can actually choose, or if I slow down this bombardment of
Actually, the thing about meditation is you get to clean you get to clean the mind. That is the function of activity, is meditation is to purify the mind. Clean it. Clean it up. You're breaking down all those paths. And that is what is happening. And you'll see the greatest habit that the mind has got is involved in this activity called egotism. Because when you sit and you try to concentrate and you try to meditate, the biggest problem is that your mind keeps running back to you. It keeps thinking of me and some activity associated with the me. Isn't that about right? Right? For those of us who meditate. And your mind run out to your me and egotin activity. You try to bring your mind attention off of it, it runs back. So you develop a strong habit of contracting into the me. And meditation, whole objective is to break through all of that. And that is what makes it the struggle. You see? That's what makes it so much of a struggle. But through meditation, we're able to transcend that. The real ideal, Brother Grady, is to transcend the mind. Transcend it. And then that way you're done with that whole problem. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, okay. So, it's the mind, you're saying, that's doing the projecting of everything that we see out here? Phenomena?
Everything that you are experiencing is happening within your mind.
Within your mind.
Within your mind. Because what is really happening? If you look at perception, what happens? There's something inside of here, consciousness or whatever you want to call it, right? Grows through the system, right? Oh, let me put it like this here. You pick up an experience out there, right? Of what appears to be out there in space.
Appears to be.
Right, which only appears. Because space is a mental construct. You can't taste space. You understand? It's not sensually experienced. Like time. You can't smell time, touch time, taste time. Time is not a sensorial experience at all. Right? It's purely a mental construct. The same is the case with space, you see, and causality. But in any case, Pam, let's say you're seeing me sitting there, right? And some image of me is coming back to you, right? Light is involved here, right? And all of these other things, they come and they hit the eye and they go along the optical nerve, transform now into that whole thing is transforming the brain, right? And the syntax, right? And then you having an experience inside of yourself, of me here, right? But all of that is inside your own mind. At no time are you ever able to go outside of your own mind at all.
So it's the eyes that project it, but it's still happening within your mind?
Yes, all of it is happening in the mind. Because our mind, something is interpreting the experience, categorizing the experience.
So is consciousness different from mind?
Consciousness itself is different from mind. Mind has no consciousness of its own. Y'all going deep today, huh? Mind is defined. Mind, there is no thing called mind. Mind itself is a process.
So, okay, am I understanding you correctly? When you said that consciousness is, mind is within consciousness, is what you're saying?
Yes. Everything is within consciousness. Let me put it like this here. Everything that you are experiencing it as an object, right? Now that means there's a subject, right?
Yeah.
Where is that subject? It's not out there with the objects. You see my point? Where is the subject that is having the experience at? Within. Don't look so surprised.
So that seer that you're talking about that that you want to develop a sense of is really your true self?
True self is a good term. You want to become aware of your true self. Aware of yourself. This is what self-awareness is all about. It is very hard to give you a taste of this through language, through description, through words. And I hope you appreciate that. The best thing that I could suggest is to go in through meditation. And that way you'll be able to get a sense of what I'm trying to put into words. Because it's impossible to put it into words. When I'm saying that everything that you are experiencing is being experienced in the context of your consciousness, there is no reality outside of your consciousness. It's a kind of statement that you cannot try to understand intellectually. You have to experience the truth of this thing. It's just like, for instance, you go into a dream, Pam, and in that dream, are there any independent existence of the things in the dream? The people in the dream are being generated by your own consciousness. The language in their mouth, their activities, all of that is being experienced. Even you, the self that is in the dream, having the experience is being generated by consciousness. So it's a very profound thing. But that is the kind of understanding that the mystics are trying to suggest we have to be able to attain in order to navigate these bargoes successfully without the experience of suffering. And we have to begin to understand that everything is of the nature of my own mind, with no exception. Nothing has a reality independent of my mind and my consciousness. Seeing this now causes us to relate differently to everything.
So we're really in control of our own experience and not anything on the outer, like you say, with anger. Nobody makes you angry.
No one
You
makes
do
you
it to
angry.
yourself.
Of course, it's our own interpretation. It's our own spin that we put on it. The same is the case with so forth and so on.
Suffering as well.
Of course, it's the same thing. And when you see it good and anger, right? But you have to understand that that is the case across the board. Everything is happening to us as a result of the spin. And I see you here. Let's ready to get this done. Yes.
Well, I want to ask, but I'll say that you said we create this.
Yes.
And I agree wholeheartedly. I also see that it's because of the tendency that we keep creating the anger.
Yes.
Or we keep creating the suffering.
Yes.
Because of the tendency.
Of the tendency.
Right. So we're in the groove of being angry because of this.
Right.
So we just keep going.
Right. And every time we indulge,
Right.
it strengthens the predisposition
Right.
to reindulge.
Okay.
There you go. And that tendency is called karma.
Right. Exactly.
Right?
Okay.
And that's how come they said that we've created all this karma. That means you got all this momentum and predisposition. And that has to be reversed. That has to be stopped. Somehow you have to break free of the momentum of your own mental tendency. And that is what meditation does. Meditation takes you out of that cycle and you are struggling to reverse the momentum of
Does
tendency.
it help you reconstruct the groove?
Yes, of course, you're going to reconstruct another groove, you see, to counter this groove. But at some point, you see, June, when the two are balanced out, you drop all of it, you see. Then you move into mind, and then there is no traces left. What are the traces when we move into mind? They are manifest in the form of memories. Interesting. Very interesting. We are carrying so many memories that are not even necessary for our functioning in this way.
But
Right?
by doing some physical act, are we able to reconstruct the groove in the mind? I mean, it's like on one of the tapes, I think you were talking about if you're angry, to balance that, you do something positive.
Yes, yes.
But how on a physical level, and I'm finding a lot of things that I do on a physical level does not change the groove here.
Yes. Yes. On the physical level, again, that is not really the way to deal with it. This is a mental thing. And therefore meditation, again, is recommended. It's all in our mind. It's all what we do with our mind. It's training our mind. But the point I was making is this, is that these tendencies, seeds, bija, samskaras, exist in the form of memories, conditions that is in the mind. The mind is full of this stuff. You see my point? And the ideal is this, is that we are able to, through meditation, clean this mind up so that a time comes when we can use the mind and just use it. But there is no residue left over. You follow my point? For instance, now, you angry at somebody, right? And you reacting really out of memory. Somewhere in your mind, you make some association somewhere. Is that right? So you get angry fundamentally out of your associations that you have with that particular activity that you see being displayed by that other person, right? No, if you had no conditioning, you would not even, you could not react to it like that. You're reacting strictly out of your conditions, right? Conditionings are memories. You see, what Krishnamurti called choiceless awareness. Choiceless awareness. You know, it's a very profound thing, you see. And again, you all are asking very insightful things. I just wish that time were permitted that we could have examined these in greater detail, but you should still pursue that on your own studies, because some insight in that is good in the sense that it stabilizes you. When we come time to our meditation, the most important thing, we have to try to understand what it is we're trying to do. If we don't really understand why we're meditating, then your meditation and all of that is going to suffer, because you don't understand, you don't even understand what you're doing. You're just going through, again now, just some kind of ritual, because somewhere you read in a book, or Bhagwan has said you should meditate something, but it's not arising out of your intelligence. You don't understand what's going on here, you see, and you will not have a stable, solid practice. So we have to try to understand these things. And the most essential thing that you understand is that you're trying to somehow offset this tendency that has been created at the level of our mind that is expressed in this thing called ego. That is what meditation is aimed to do. It is breaking down that whole structure, transcending it, giving you a taste of what it's like to be a non-ego. And again, words are so inadequate here. There's no way to really capture in words what is trying to be communicated here to you. So you have to kind of use your intuition. We're having an intuitive discussion. Yes, brother.
Okay, so from what you're saying, the question I had earlier is, if a person is already or meditates now, or doesn't, either way, and doesn't have the guru as of yet, and is seeking the guru, should that person attempt to meditate or quiet the mind, or should that person continue to meditate what they already do in the process?
I think that any efforts that quieting the mind have to be looked at positively. You see, whether anything ultimately comes out of that is another question. The question of whether a person can even meditate without a guru has to be really conceived. Because normally what that person is doing, it's just like, how can you initiate yourself? It's like you can't be your own father, how you can't be your own mother. It is very difficult to initiate yourself, because fundamentally, that whole thing, even meditation, is a part of this relationship to the guru. You know, there's no such, I mean, I've seen this in my lifetime happen all the time, is that we try to disconnect the methodology from the root. And you cannot disconnect the methodology from the root. The methodology only has value because it's connected to it. But in all of our minds, we try to do that, you see. And that is why the mystics are continuously reminding us that in yoga and meditation and all these things, the number one thing is your relationship to the root. You see, that's the number one thing. And so I question whether a methodology ultimately is of any real value, disconnected from a group, you see. I wonder if that has any value at all. It's certainly better than going out killing somebody, so I suppose in that sense, you know. But whether it's going to get you somewhere, I'm very doubtful of that. I don't know of any incidents where it's taken anybody in, you know, at all. It's in the same category like reading books and stuff. It's not taking you. It's just circular movement. Yes, ma'am.
If killing is an experience of the mind, like most of our experiences are, then why do we pay karmic debt? I mean,
you will experience karma is the whole law of karma will always prevail, Joe, as long as we see everything as being real. You see my point? If when you kill or you do any action that you believe to be real, then that real action is going to produce a real consequence. You see my point? So it's whatever you take to be real. Your karma will reflect that. But karma ultimately is in the mind. Ultimately, there is no such thing even as karma. Now this is radical. But you're asking questions that is taking us in those directions. But when I say that ultimately there's no such thing as karma, then that can easily confuse you. Right? Because then you start thinking that, well, I can do anything I want. No, for you, karma is real. Why? Because you take all this to be real. By definition. So karma is also real. So these are just really the kinds of questions that can go on all night here, right? They're interesting questions, and I don't mind indulging in them. But the bottom line on the path, of course, is your meditation. That's the bottom line. And that is the whole idea behind all of these meetings. Hopefully we all come out of here with the understanding that it's only by meditating that you're going to develop that skill that's going to help you in this life and particularly at the time of your death. And that's what you really got to be worried about. You know, how you going to survive the dissolution of this ego, how you going to handle your death, how you going to handle this die. And that's the thing that you got to get right on. The other thing, how to deal with this suffering. When they used to come to the Buddha would send out before he even entered into the village a list of 10 things that he will not even discuss while he's in the village. Because, of course, when the Buddha is coming, so many people are coming out. They've got so many questions about so many things. And the Buddha would make it very clear to those villages that he's coming into that he's only there to discuss real deal. He said, don't ask me nothing about God, don't ask me nothing about higher region. We're only going to talk about suffering and the ending of suffering. So in some sense, you see, sometimes we can get too far off on a tangent, you know, a little ahead of ourselves. The thing that confronts most of us, our reality, is how we're going to deal with this suffering, how we're going to deal with this confusion, this sorrow, and the inevitability of our death and dying and all of the horror associated with that. That's where we're at. And meditation is the only suggestion I have for you. Meditation and observing yourself. Those are the keys to this yoga, this path. You must seriously start observing yourself. And you must try to meditate. If you don't do those two things, then there's nothing I can do to help. There's nothing that can be said there. And that's the whole thing. That's the essence of this. So, yes, Lord. Yes, this is the last day. We can spur it a little bit.
Related to karma and reincarnation. He said, to attain a human body, you must have done something merit.
Yeah.
Well, since animals can't think, and I guess they don't have egos
tale is about how one of the great masters inadvertently stepped upon an ant and how that ant got a human birth in the next life. So perhaps, Dorothy, is more based on the grace, you see. But you have to understand something about karma. After that karma is exhausted, there's another cycle that you go through that gets a whole nother form. You see, you're not locked into that form forever. Each form that we get is had simply in order to give expression to a certain kind of karma, a certain portion of our karma at that time. We all have infinite karma because we have had infinite birth. And that karma is both negative and positive, right? It's full of so many tendencies. And so many seeds have already been planted in our lives. And whenever the conditions that are right for those seeds to come into fruition occur, then that is what happens. The bodies are like that, you see. Now let's say that you got some impulse somewhere deep down inside of you, some desire, some urge to kill, some urge to do violence, to harm, to hurt somebody. All right? Now you may go 4 or 5 lifetimes and you'll never give a chance to express that. But somewhere down the road, you will get a body that allows you to express that urge. Even if it's 100 million lifetimes. So at the end of the period of karma, that form shuts down. Do you understand? All of these forms are forms that we are taking to accommodate a particular portion of our karma. It does not exhaust it. So you will be an animal, you know, as long as that is necessary for that portion of your karma. Then you may go into a plant form. You see, you may go up, you may go down, you may go anywhere. The question you were answering, Dorothy, is this, that it's based on the assumption that you started off as an animal, and you did not. You see, we started off in a position, you see, that enabled us to create the good karma, right? In the bad karma.
So when you start off human,
Yes.
before maybe some
Yes.
of the universe,
Yes.
equipment.
Actually, you started off God.
Well, yeah.
Yes. It descended to the human, et cetera, et cetera. But the point is that for purposes of trying to make sense of this, understand it as if you started off human, right? And then generated activities, and then just went down, and been going up and down that scale ever since. But you did not, contrary to God, you did not start off human. You did not start off human. Have I exhausted you, right? So, we will take a recess for a few weeks, I think, with some rest, and then we will resume. And hopefully, during the interim, that you all will have had some time to really think about all of these things that have been said, not only in this satsang, but in so many other satsangs as well, as it relates to meditation and all these other things. And I think the only thing that I can say that will be of any real, true, and lasting value to you is that when you are searching for your refuges, remember, you know, Nama Guru Vaya, find refuge in the Guru, find refuge in the initiation that the Guru gives you. Maharaj used to always say, I remember going, Pam, in my days of doubt, I had days of doubt. And I can remember writing a long, haranguing letter to Maharaj, full of these doubts, expressing all these doubts, you know. And Maharaj responded back and said, brother, you can tell by your letter you were all upset. I was upset about this and upset about that. But I remember in closing, P.S. after all, he addressed all of the other issues, you know. But he wrote a P.S. back and he says, remember, he said, never have any doubt in your issues. And I think that that is the thing that I can best pass on to those who are beneficiaries of that initiation. That we must take refuge in the the initiation that we receive. Take refuge in the methodology that we've been given, and to never have any doubt that this methodology, in the initiation and to the use of that methodology, will bring an